state-of-the-art stealth fighters, a brand new aircraft carrier, soaring budgets, and a reduction in the number of troops. No, this is not your grandfather's Chinese military. The People's Liberation Army was long known not for superior tactics or technology, but for sheer manpower. During the Korean War, over 1 million troops like these, immortalized here along the Chinese-North Korean border, forced the retreat of UN forces. But times have changed as the Chinese government has led a relentless push to both modernize and strengthen its military. Start in the sky, as China publicly debuted the J-20 stealth fighter jet last year. It's China's answer to the American F-22 and F-35, China's newest generation warplane. It also just launched its second aircraft carrier. It's done all that by spending more and prioritizing needs. At about $215 billion US per year, and with that number set to keep rising, China has the second largest defense budget in the world. But they've reduced costs by cutting about 300,000 men from the standing army, choosing to spend that money elsewhere. It's all designed for a future China that can project its military far beyond its borders and compete with the United States, not just in Asia, but everywhere. China just announced its first overseas base in Djibouti. But it still appears to have a long way to go before it can truly compete with the U.S. on a global scale. For example, experts say the J-20 fighter lags in stealth technology compared to the F-35. Its new carrier won't enter service until likely 2020, and when it does, that will make 2 carriers for China and 10 for the United States. The U.S. also spends more than double what China does on its defense budget and has hundreds of bases overseas. The Chinese are just now building their first base. Finally, we don't know exactly what the Chinese military is capable of on the modern battlefield. China's last war was a 6-week engagement with Vietnam in 1979. How well today's military would fare in a major power war is pure speculation. China knows that it's lagging behind the U.S., but the government seems determined to try and catch up.
Forging the future of Chinese policy. The 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China just got underway hours ago. Chinese President Xi Jinping gave the opening remarks, saying it is time to transform the nation into, quote, a mighty force that could lead the world. The week-long event will shape the country's leadership for the next half-decade and beyond, impacting everything from U.S. policy to China's approach on North Korea. Joining me right now is the author of The Coming Collapse of China, Gordon Chang. And Gordon, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Maria.
First, explain the importance of this 19th Congress, why this is so important.
The Congress meets once every 5 years, and what's happening this time is Xi Jinping, the ruler of China, wants to consolidate his power. But he wants to do it in a way that could cause problems for China in the future, because over the last couple decades, they've developed rules, institutional norms. And for Xi to consolidate his position, he needs to break some of those, which means that infighting in the future is going to be unrestrained by these rules. And so, therefore, there's a real concern about the nature of the Communist Party going forward. But at least in the interim, you're going to have Xi Jinping completely dominating political landscape in China.
And what is he trying to do, calling it a mighty force? Saying that, you know, the country is going to be transformed into this quote-unquote mighty force. What is he wanting to lead the world?
Yeah, this is going back to his signature phrase, the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, or the Chinese dream. And the idea is that China is going to take back its place it had 300-400 years ago at the center of the world. And so this is going to be an issue for us, because they have goals which are inconsistent with the way the world works right now. So, for instance, they're trying to grab territory from an arc of neighbors, from India in the south to South Korea in the north. That destabilizes the international system, and that puts it into conflict with the United States, because we believe in an open architecture for the world.
Let me ask you about that. Does the U.S. have a strategy, a policy with regard to China, or is our policy just around what China does regarding North Korea?
Yeah, I think President Trump does not have a China policy. He has a North Korea policy. That's his #1 goal. And his relations with Beijing are subordinate to that, which means that he will be good to China if he believes China is cooperating with us, and he'll be harsh on them if he believes that they're not. And we have seen this in in his early months, because he went back on every campaign promise on China, because when China was sort of looking to help us on North Korea, and then when it looked like China was really stalling, and we saw this at the last week of June, there were all those rash of actions really downgrading China in his view.
Is that the right tact? I mean, should we be doing more to have more of a policy with China, regardless of what happens in North Korea, or do you think the president's plan is the right action?
Yeah, I think the president's plan is right, because North Korea is obviously the urgent threat. And indeed, you know, what we have done in the past is we've elevated China way too important in our foreign relations. And we've done that at the expense of our ties with our allies, for instance, Japan, South Korea, and a number of other countries in the region. So I think that this is generally a good thing. Now, of course, it would be nice to have good China policies throughout. But nonetheless, we've got an urgent issue right now with regard to North Korea. And so I think the president's approach is the right one.
Hank Greenberg, the CEO of CV Star, former CEO of AIG, who's had, you know, relationships in China for a long time, probably one of the first businessmen to ever do so. He said, he just got back from China, he told me this the other day, that he believes after the 19th Congress that they're going to get real serious about North Korea. Do you believe that?
Yes, but they might be in the wrong way, in the sense that Xi Jinping has been sort of fueling North Korea, transferring very important weapons and equipment and technology to the North Koreans, especially their ballistic missile program.
So they're helping the North.
They're weaponizing the North. So, for instance, those missiles that were launched on July 4th and 28th, their first intercontinental ballistic missiles, those rode to the launch sites on Chinese mobile launchers. And those mobile launchers make North Korea a real threat, because their missiles can now hide. Also, China's most advanced missiles, the ones that it tested August 24th, February 12th, and May 21st, look to be variants of China's JL-1 submarine-launched missile. And that is indeed something that the Trump administration needs to talk to the Chinese about.
This is a really big deal. You're saying that China is weaponizing North Korea at a time that we are worried that North Korea is developing its nuclear program. Did this come up between the president and President Xi? I mean, what does the U.S. have to say about the fact that China is weaponizing North Korea? Should the U.S. be doing anything?
Yeah, and what President Trump has been doing, I think, is have been having at least private conversations. But what we saw with his September 21 executive order, where he basically says to the world, you do business with North Korea or you do business with us, but not both at the same time, that was directed toward China, as everybody knows.
Wow.
That was really good policy, and it's really a monumental step forward, especially if the president enforces it. We'll see if he has the political will to do that. But that's really his China policy, which is basically, you better help us on North Korea or we're going to impose costs on you. Yeah, and I think that's the right approach.
We want to bring up, the president is tweeting right now. I want to bring you that tweet. But first, before you go, real quick, what is all of this impact on the U.S.?
Well, Xi Jinping, I think, is going to sort of go back and unreform the economy, close it up, target foreign investors, as he's been doing over the last 5 years. That's a real business issue for the United States, and it's going to cause friction. Regardless of what we think about North Korea, U.S. companies are going to continue to complain.
Yeah, all right. Gordon, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. Thanks very much for your insights.
Thanks, Maria.
We appreciate it. Gordon Chen.